The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, my name is Aya, and thanks so much for joining us this morning for our webinar, Designing for Teams, How to Design a Collaborative Team-Based Online Course. We started our webinar series to share some of our best tips and practices that we've discovered while designing courses on NovoEd. And after our webinar, we will send you a quick 5-minute survey. And if you can fill that out, give us your feedback. We would really appreciate it because we hope to do a lot more of these webinars in the future. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and we will share slides with everyone afterwards. And without further ado, I am very excited to introduce to you my colleague Andrew, who is the Manager of Support and Technical Operations, who's done a lot of research on teams and team learning and team formation on NovoEd. And yeah, Andrew, can you introduce yourself and take it away?
Perfect. Well, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, Aya will be there to help answer them, so please do ask them in the box. And at the end, I will answer any sort of more broadly applicable questions you might have as well. So, what will this webinar consist of? Well, there are a couple of different components we're going to go through. The first component is why team learning? So NovoEd is focused on team learning, but what is so effective about team learning? We'll look a little bit more in detail about what's effective and how to use that. The next component is how do you actually design a course for teams? Teams are sort of a challenging concept in some ways, and thinking about how you put together a course effectively for that is a really key important point to making sure you use them effectively. Then we'll take a look at some case studies, 3 different examples across different NovoEd courses about how teams are effectively used and different deliverables and projects team uses. Finally, we'll take a look at some best practices. This will be partially based on different research I've done, so you'll see some data we've looked at on different aspects of teams, and then take a look at sort of what are the key points to take away. Finally, as a reminder, if you have any questions, make sure you post them in the chat box on the webinar, and they will be responded to. Okay, let's take a look. Team learning. So the first thing I want you to do is think about each of these 3 different learning experiences. Lectures, sort of a big lecture hall, someone in front of the whole lecture explaining and talking to everybody. Online course, maybe not necessarily NovoEd, but what you normally would consider a typical online course, usually by yourself. And then finally, thinking about workshops. What is effective about each of these, and what do you really learn the most from? Now, of course, the answer for us here is team-based workshop learning, right? Where you work together with a bunch of different people. I know personally this is where I have gained the most. And I think there are 2 key different reasons why team-based learning workshops can be so effective. One of those reasons is the ability to learn from others. Not only if you're taking a lecture by yourself or you're doing an online course by yourself, yeah, you can look at the materials, you can have your own knowledge, research, but there's something additional of being able to work with others closely and be able to tap into their knowledge and experience as well. Another key component of what makes teams so successful is accountability. What do I mean by this? Well, once again, if you're thinking about you doing something by yourself, you're responsible to yourself, which sometimes can be effective, but I also know can also times not always be effective too. But when you are working with other members in the team, if you feel the responsibility to complete a certain aspect of a project for someone else and not just for yourself, you're going to be a lot more likely to complete it. That accountability really enables teams to push the boundaries of what can be effective and how much people can put into different teamwork. So how do teams actually work and look in an online environment like NovoEd? So what we do on NovoEd is a couple of different components. The first is we may want to make sure there's a safe environment for collaboration, where people can work with each other in a safe, enclosed workspace. You'll see a photo of this in just a moment. And then also make sure there are a bunch of different team formation options. How are teams put together? You can do it by learners, where they're self-formed. You can have it done by the teaching team, course administrators, or even by the computer based on random or actually algorithmic qualifications. We also provide mentorship. Once again, if you think about learning from others and accountability, both of these aspects can be enhanced by mentors who not only bring more experience, but are another layer to be accountable for. And then finally, the main point of the team experience on NovoEd is to help drive a project to successful completion. So what does this look like? Well, there are two aspects to teams on NovoEd. One is the public workspace, the team profile. In this particular aspect, you have this, which is available for everyone and can be especially beneficial when learners are forming the teams themselves. On this, you have the team name. This is usually figured out by the person who first starts the team, and description. What is this team about? Additionally, on the right, you'll see team profile questions. These are questions put together by the teaching team, the course administrators, for teams to answer. And this can also help enhance figuring out what teams are going to be focusing on during the course experience. Now, this is the public-facing side. The private-facing side, you have the team workspace. You have a bunch of different options here, from being able to chat with all of your other different team members. You can collaborate with different documents, upload PDFs, Word documents, and more. And then finally, since not everything is going to be done asynchronously, some things may be done synchronously at the same time, we provide tools to be able to schedule meetings. You can poll your teammates. You can actually put it as a reminder on the team workspace, and you can even start video conferencing directly from the team workspace itself. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of why teams and what teams looks like. So let's go into the next component. How do you actually think about utilizing teams when building a course itself? So let's take a quick look at this. The key component here is thinking about not so much the first question of how do I use teams, but thinking about what is my course goal or objective? What am I trying to accomplish? And clarifying this is, of course, the most important thing in figuring out a course. And the one thing I would additionally add is you may want to be careful about how many course goals and objectives you have. So the more you have, yes, you can meet a lot of those goals, but it'll dilute sort of the clarity that one or two simple course goals have, and it'll limit the amount you can actually accomplish that. Once you have figured out what the course goal or objective is, the next component is figuring out what projects or deliverables actually allow different participants to show their understanding and knowledge of that course goal or objective. And then finally, once you've figured out what the different projects and objectives are, then you can think about, okay, where can teams come in that help enhance, once again, accountability and then being able to learn from each other. So once again, think backwards, start with the goal, move towards the deliverables and the projects, and then think about where teams come in to help in that particular situation. So before we move on and talk about teams in a little bit more detail, I want to ask a quick poll question out of you. In your own personal experience, actually, let me get this poll up, and it is now running, so please feel free to answer it. But in your own experience, which of the following do you think is the most important factor for successful teamwork? Is it clear goals, really having teams understand what they're doing? Is it informal relationships among the team members, sort of that ability to maybe overcome different challenges because you're already friends with teams members? Is it having very clear defined roles and responsibilities within the team where everyone knows exactly what they're doing? Or is it clear communication where everyone in the team is able to listen to each other? And then finally, is it just being able to have that effective team facilitator or lead who can push things forward as needed? So I'll give you a couple more minutes, a few more seconds to respond to this. But just think about, based on your previous experience with teams. So let's take a look at some of the results here. Thanks for responding. you should now be able to see the different results. And interesting. So a lot of you really pointed out the effective need for clear communication and listening, helping overcome responsibilities, but also sort of clearly defining roles and responsibilities within the team itself. So let's take a look at where this comes from, some of the different challenges that come up with teams. So here are some of the challenges that teams often face. Once again, lack of direction, right? Where person team, one way to make sure you prevent this is you just have clear goals. Now, when we're thinking about it from an online team perspective, you need to think about not only the goals, but the deliverables. What are teams expected to do, and how are they going to demonstrate that they've done that? In-person teams, you can be a little bit more lax because teams are going to be meeting. With online teams, you want to be extra clear and transparent about what is expected of teams, and that will help prevent any lack of direction. Another challenge teams often face, as you might know, is lack of participation in discussion. In this particular case, sort of clear roles and responsibilities can help in-person teams work this out, where everyone knows what they're doing and then can interact with each other, considering what they have. When we're thinking about this from an online perspective, sort of the structure of the team is really important. And there are two key components of this. One is thinking about how teams schedule their time. Is it going to be working in an asynchronous way, which team members aren't expected to be on at the same time? Or is it that teams are going to be expected to meet maybe an hour a week to do this? Now, not necessarily every team's going to do it the same way, but making sure it's clear as part of the instructional design what's expected of different participants will help participants understand how to best participate and discuss different challenges with their team members. Now, taking a look at absence of team identity. Well, this is one where sort of being friends and building up that informal relationship can be very effective with in-person teams. Online, it's a little bit harder to sometimes build up that informal relationship, but being able to build teams around mutual areas of interest can be very beneficial and help the team sort of coalesce around a certain area of understanding. And then finally, sort of difficulties making decisions, how decisions are made. Well, sort of clear process for decision making with an in-person team is very key, but for an online team, once again, decision-making structure, and this can be dictated by the teaching team through how the deliverables are done, or it can be done by an effective team lead who helps move the decision process on. So a lot of different ways to think about in-person teams to online teams. Online teams, you need to be just a little bit more careful and more specific and clear about how you're expecting some of the different things to be done. So let's take a look at a couple of different case studies, some courses that have used online teams effectively on the NovoEd platform. The first course we will take a look at is Acumen and IDEO.org's Design Kit, Human-Centered Design. So for this course, the objective is learning to apply the concepts of human-centered design, the project or deliverable, by doing it by designing and testing a solution for a real-world problem. Once again, sort of the goal then comes down to the project. Now, how do you think about actually designing specific deliverables or assignments for this? Well, in this particular case, the course follows the design thinking methodology, and so the assignments generally follow this as well. So one of the assignments is opportunities for design. This is where teams gather insights together and then also are responsible for the ideation, the brainstorming phase. And they then turn in sort of a bunch of different possible solutions to the challenge and problem they are thinking about. The second part is assignment is the final one, the final deliverable, where they share their solution that they have tested, that they've researched, and this can be done in a number of different ways, whether it's presentation slides or videos. So what about this course effectively used teams? Well, one, providing very clear deliverables through templated submissions. We'll have an example of that in just a moment. Providing estimated completion time. How much time is the team expected to spend on different activities? And then finally, being clear about what decisions need to be made. So in the last deliverable, the share your solution one, it makes it clear that hey, you're only expected to spend an hour. However, we welcome any team that spends more time, but that's a decision that needs to be made by the whole team. In this particular case, it's making it very clear there's a decision that needs to be made and giving the team the opportunity to make that very clear decision. So let's take a look at an example assignment. In this particular case, you'll see this is a template. So it has very clear places for what the team to answer specific questions. Additionally, you'll notice it says 30 minutes. This gives the team a good idea of how much time is expected to be spent on this particular activity. So let's take a look at another course. This was Stanford's Technology Entrepreneurship, where the course goal is to learn how to start a startup. And what's the project related to that? Well, creating a pitch for a startup idea. So the goal, starting a startup, the project related to it, pitch. In this particular case, the course is designed around the different components that you need to understand before you get to a final pitch. So one of the assignments is a low fidelity prototype. This is where teams are responsible for actually putting something together that will help resemble or help them demo whatever their pitch idea is, and then also help them refine it. They can submit this as slides or a website. There are a lot of different opportunities for that. And then finally, the pitch deck. That's the final deliverable. And then teams together turn in a pitch deck that is aimed for different potential investors. And this, once again, utilizes some of the previous assignment, including market research, which is another one, and the prototype previously mentioned. So what about this course was effective? Well, one, clear team formation tips about what skills and experience to look for in other team members. Team formation, in this case, is done by the students, the learners, the participants, and this course provides very clear guidance about what to look for. I'll get to that a little bit more in a second. And then the second component is clearly providing responsibilities within the team based on typical startup roles. So you'll have someone maybe more focused in marketing, someone more focused in product, the team lead is the CEO. That type of thing provides the team with a lot clearer responsibilities and understandings of what need to be done by each person for each project along the way. So let's take a look at the different team formation tips. In this particular case, the team leads are responsible for helping to invite other members of the team, and these are different suggestions the course provides to those different team members. So one thing for them to think about is when you're assembling a startup or a team, you want to make sure there's a bunch of different skills that are being brought to the table. Once again, learning from other people's experiences. And that is one of many different criteria and suggestions that this course helps provide to help team leads really strengthen their team. Finally, the last course we'll take a look at is Philanthropy University's Essentials of Nonprofit Strategy. So this course goal is a little bit broader in the sense of its goal is to learn how to develop organizational strategy, quite broad, but the project and the way it does that is by creating and then evaluating an organizational logic model. In this particular case, the whole course focuses just on the topic of childhood obesity to really be able to understand and see how logic models work. So how does this actually work? Well, one assignment is, of course, to develop a logic model with different members of your team. In this case, the course focuses logic models around inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. But one of the key important points of this is being able to evaluate and improve the logic model. So one of the different assignments and projects teams have is to really learn about how to improve the outputs and the outcomes discussed by using the SMART goal framework. So really making sure those goals are nicely targeted. And this enables teams to go back and look at the logic model and improve that logic model that would then help them be able to utilize and create more effective logic models in the future. So what are some of the things this course does really effectively? Well, once again, learner-formed teams around mutual areas of interest. And so we will get to this in a little bit more. And then the second point, very similar to the Acumen and IDEO.org course, is clear assignment structures around clear questions and then sort of very clear understandings of what the team needs to turn in. So let's take a look at what the mutual area of interest looks like. You might remember that team profile at the start, where everyone was focused around education. You'll see on the right, once again, this is effective use of team profile questions to help the team focus on a specific area. The other component is what we have, individual profile questions. So these are questions that every participant and learner can answer themselves. And at the end of it, all of these questions are then searchable. And so here's an example on the left of level of commitment each person has. And so then you can find, depending on what you're looking for, other people similar to your level of commitment to the course that can help with the team in the same level of expectation for the course. Finally, let's take a look at some research about teams. What are some best practices for how you utilize teams? So there are a lot of different components of teams. One component is, what is an effective team size? So let's take a quick look at this. This chart shows two different components. The blue on the bottom, you will see this is each team size, which ranges from teams of 3 to teams of 10. The blue bars are representative of how much team chat activity, how much message activity is each team member on average contributing. And so what you'll see here is 3 and 7 really stand out. After 7, you get a remarkable drop-off. The red line is a little bit more interesting. This is what percentage of the team is actually inactive. So what you'll see is teams of 3, on average, about 10% of different members will be inactive, but then it starts increasing a lot more. By the time you get to 8, it'll be closer to 20% of the team on average will be inactive. So what's the takeaway? Well, the takeaway here is the larger the team, the sort of more inactive the team will be. And then after a certain amount of time, sort of after about 7, the average amount of participation drops. As such, we generally recommend teams be in the area of 3 to 7, but really not more than 7, as there will be a more significant drop-off there. What type of team formation to use? As you might remember, we have sort of individually learner-formed teams, but we also have teams that can be formed by the teaching team or a computer. And what this clearly shows is on the left, you'll see the average participation in different social activities for teams that were formed by a teaching team. And then on the right, you'll see for teams formed by the learner. And these courses were basically the same, except for this difference in team formation. The thing you'll notice is the red line, the team chats, dramatically increases. So you have a lot more different people participating when the teams are formed by the learners themselves. And this makes a certain amount of sense. If you're a team lead and you have to start a team, you're going to have much more responsibility to that team. If you're someone trying to join a team, you're much more sort of accountable to your team members if you had to put yourself on the line and request to be part of a team. The interesting thing about this too is it's not just team chats, but other social activity things as well also increase. And so we definitely do recommend, when possible, using learner self-formed teams, which increases accountability and engagement. The final thing we'll take a look at, and this was partially mentioned, was team leads. How important are team leads? Once again, when teams are being formed by the learners or participants, the person forming the team is given the role of team lead, or if it's being formed by the teaching team, then the teaching team can decide who the team lead is. And one of the things you'll notice is sort of team leads who are active, at least as active as their team members, those teams are much more successful than when the team lead is not quite as active. So one thing to think about with this is, how can you really encourage team leads to promote effective activity? And we talked previously about the Stanford course, where you have clear suggestions for the team lead about what to look for in skills with other team members. Something like that. How can that be effectively applied in your course to give team leads sort of that opportunity to understand what is expected of them? So, what are our key takeaways in terms of tips? Well, 1, team size. We recommend ranging of team members between 3 to 7, but really no more than 7, as that starts to be a little bit more unwieldy. Team formation type. How should teams be formed? Well, we recommend the learners and the participants form the teams themselves. This encourages greater level of accountability than if the teams are formed by the teaching team. Finally, let's take a look at team identity. Making sure you effectively use team profile questions or even individual profile questions to help teams find each other effectively and create that identity even at the very start. And finally, with team leads, think about how you can encourage them. Is it providing extra information when they're forming teams themselves, or even sort of extra incentive along the way when the teams are in motion. Well, that's about it from me. If you do have any questions, as a reminder, make sure to ask them in the chat box, and I will take a quick look at some of the different questions that have already come up. So, one, how many team profile questions do you recommend having? How many is too many? Well, I think, so that's a great question. I think the main thing you want to think about is, how do you expect teams to sort of share a common level of identity, and what's relevant for the course? I think for the most part, you'll find maybe anywhere between 1 and 3 is probably about effective. Once again, the more team profile questions you have, the more it ends up diluting sort of the goal and the identity of the group. So once again, usually 1 to 3 will be the approximate range you're going to want. Second, how do I know if teams are forming in the course? What if they aren't forming? So this is something where you can actually use analytics, and I won't show an exact example of this now, but what I would actually recommend doing is taking a look at help.novoed.com, and you'll see that. So there are 2 different ways. One way is to take a look at the community, and you'll see a list of different teams. Also, you can see it in analytics itself. Number 3. If we want to do pre-assigned teams for organizational reasons, great. What should we watch out for? What are the best practices for assigned team differentiation? I think there are a bunch of different ways you can sort of encourage additional sort of incentive and identity even when you're assigning the teams. So I think the first thing is, when we're talking about when we're talking about team identity, often what can be useful is just a simple survey, right? Send out a survey, figure out what are different people looking for and what do different people want to get out of the course. And then you can assemble those different people together in a similar team and let them all know what their similarity is. And that should help start and jumpstart the process of team identity, even when they aren't being formed themselves. The other thing you can pay attention to is thinking about incentives and accountability. So when you have teams that are being formed by learners themselves, they have sort of that accountability and sort of incentive to do something effectively in their team. Think about, what can we do sort of additional to help provide that incentive, sort of create that bonding within the teams that may not be done when the teams are formed manually. Number 4, one of the challenges with self-formed teams is that the people who don't start aren't picked by a team. Yes, so there are many people who aren't always picked by a team. Are there any strategies for helping these particular individuals? Well, I think the main thing is, there are a couple tips with this. One is making sure that people fill out their profiles, and is usually a great way to help start this. Usually people who fill out profiles in large enough courses will get a certain amount of invitations. That's probably the key point. The second point is, often what can be really effective is making sure there's an individual assignment. So an assignment that is not team-based at the beginning of the course. What this does is it provides a person the opportunity to be able to submit an assignment and then also have that publicly displayed to everyone. And also, additionally, it shows their commitment to the course. So thinking about different ways where individuals can make themselves more public within the course itself is usually the best strategy. And then, I guess, the final question here is, any examples of people who have created leader guides for team leads, or any features you've considered adding to help team leads with their role? So there was the example of technology entrepreneurship. I think the other examples I can think of are for smaller courses, but where if a team is maybe falling behind schedule, a course administrator will directly reach out to the different team leads and ask how they can help. And that's also something that helps incentivize them a little bit more. But we can get back to you about maybe some other potential examples that might be available for helping team leads as well. And then finally, let's take a look at this here. A couple last questions. Any data for the assignment completion rate with Not specifically in this particular case, but because a bigger differentiation to look at has been self-formed teams versus manually formed teams. Our focus has been much more with that. And often in manually formed teams, team leads do not play a same role, whereas in self-formed teams, you will always have that team lead since the team lead is there from the very beginning. So it's not exactly something we've taken a look at. Finally, social cohesion among students online. Well, this is a great question, and I think it really goes back to getting to what people are interested about and getting people the opportunity to bond. So one of the examples actually was in the strategy course. There was a great group of people who worked really effectively together, even though it was probably too big, of people who were all interested in sort of arts nonprofits. And they were able to bond over their intersecting and love of the arts and understanding how that works in a nonprofit sense. So once again, getting people with similar interests and making those interests self-evident to different people can often be really effective for that. Well, considering it is now 9:30, I want to thank all of you for joining, and I hope this has been informative, and we look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you.